At 11 minutes past 4 on a Thursday afternoon, the crowd outside a small Lagos pharmacy began screaming that the young woman behind the counter was a child killer, and someone threw the first stone before she had said a single word. The glass of the front door did not shatter all at once. It starred, a white flower spreading across the pane, and then the second stone came, and the door folded in a bright shower onto the tiled floor, where she stocked the cough syrups. A boy of 7 named Chinedu had been carried into a hospital 2 streets away that morning, shaking with fever, after swallowing malaria tablets his mother had bought. And the word in the market was that the fake drug had come from this shop, from this woman, from her shelf. She did not run. She did not scream back at them. She stood behind the counter in her white coat, with her hands flat on the glass, and she watched the neighborhood she had served for 3 years press itself against her broken door with hatred in its face. What the crowd did not know, as they called for her license and her blood, was that the woman they were condemning had written down, by hand, on a dated page, the exact origin of every tablet in that building, and that the proof of who had truly poisoned that child was already sitting in a sealed brown carton she had refused, on principle, to open. To understand how a penniless young pharmacist in Mushin brought down one of the largest drug distributors in Lagos, you have to go back, past the stones, past the fever, to a quiet shop that smelled of antiseptic, and to a woman who used to wake before the sun to count her stock. Her name was Adaize Nwosu, and everyone on the street called her Ida. She was 28 years old, and she had inherited 2 things from her late mother, and nothing else: a small chemist shop with peeling green paint, and a habit that the other traders thought was madness. Her mother, Chioma Nwosu, had been a pharmacist too, in the days when the profession in Lagos was a war against a flood of fake medicine, and she had drummed one sentence into her only daughter from the time the girl could hold a pen. "Write it down," her mother used to say, tapping the worn blue ledger with one finger. Paper does not lie, and paper does not forget. Ada had grown up on a stool behind that counter, watching her mother record every delivery in that same blue hardcover book, the date in the left column, the supplier, the drug, the batch number, copied digit for digit off the carton, the quantity, the price, the day the seal was broken. When her mother died of a stroke at 53, slumped over that very ledger with her glasses still on, Ada did not change a thing. She kept the shop. She kept the habit, and she kept the blue book going in the same careful hand, because to stop would have felt like burying her mother a second time. This is the part of the story that the crowd outside the broken door knew nothing about. They saw a young woman alone in a faded shop. They did not see the discipline her mother had welded into her, line by dated line. Ada ran her little pharmacy the way her mother had taught her, which is to say she ran it like a person who expected, one day, to be asked to prove every word she had ever spoken. She bought her drugs only from licensed wholesalers. She refused the cheap consignments that came off the back of lorries at half price, the ones the other shop owners snapped up and sold at a fat margin, because her mother had taught her that a low price on medicine is a coffin with a discount. She logged every carton the day it arrived, before she so much as cut the tape. And there was one rule she kept above all the others, a rule that the people screaming for her ruin would have laughed at if they had known it. When a carton arrived with its security seal intact, she recorded the seal, the batch, and the date, and she did not break that seal until she was ready to sell from it, so that the government tracking system and her own book would always agree on the exact day a sealed box was opened in her shop. It was a slow way to work. It was an old woman's way to work. And it was about to save her life. If you have ever watched someone quiet and careful get written off as guilty before anyone bothered to check, and quietly ached to see them proven right, then you already belong here. So take a second to subscribe, because the people who do are exactly who this channel is for. The trouble did not begin with Ada at all. It began 3 months earlier, in a glass and marble office on Victoria Island, in the mind of a man named Chief Dr. Ikenna Madu. Chief Madu was 52 years old, and in the business pages of the Lagos newspapers, he was a giant. He was the chairman of Madu Pharmaceuticals, the biggest medicine distributor on that side of the city, the man whose lorries fed 1,000 small chemist shops, and his face smiled out of full-page advertisements above the words, "Your health, our promise." He wore navy agbada so crisp it looked carved, and gold-rimmed glasses, and he sat on the board of a teaching hospital and gave loud donations to a pharmacy school that had hung his portrait in its lobby. He was, by every public measure, a pillar. He did not deal in poison. That was the story he told, and most of Lagos believed it. The truth was that Chief Madu had made one quiet, catastrophic decision the way powerful men so often do, in a hurry, for money, certain it would never be traced. A container of anti-malarial tablets in his warehouse had failed an internal quality check. The active ingredient was a fraction of what the label promised, near useless against a real fever. The work of a counterfeit factory in another country that had sold him a forged consignment at a price too sweet to refuse. An honest man would have destroyed the whole container at a loss of 40 million naira. Chief Madu did not become rich by destroying 40 million naira. He gave a single instruction to a frightened warehouse manager, and the bad cartons were quietly mixed back into the ordinary stock and sent out on the lorries, scattered thin across hundreds of small shops, so that no single pharmacy would receive enough to notice a pattern, so that if a child somewhere fell sick, it would look like one unlucky shop, one careless owner, one bad apple, and never like a rotten tree on Victoria Island. He was certain of one thing above all. When the sickness came, as he knew it might, the blame would land on whichever small, powerless chemist had the misfortune to sell that particular box. And a man with 1,000 lorries and a wall of lawyers would simply be the respectable supplier, grieving from a distance. He was right about almost everything. He was wrong about exactly one thing, and it was the only thing that mattered. He did not know that one of those sealed cartons would be delivered to a pharmacist who dated and logged her seals like her dead mother was watching over her shoulder. The carton arrived at Ada's shop on a Monday morning, on the regular Madu Pharmaceuticals lorry, with its security seal whole and unbroken. She did exactly what she always did. She checked the seal against the delivery note. She copied the batch number off the side of the box into the blue ledger. In the date column, she wrote the day, and beside it she wrote 3 words that her mother had taught her to write. Seal intact, unopened. Then, because her shelf still held stock from an older trusted batch, she placed the new sealed carton on the high shelf in the back room, and she did not open it. For 9 days, that carton sat sealed, recorded, untouched, while she sold malaria tablets from the earlier box. And that small, stubborn act, the refusal to break a seal before its time, was the difference, though she could not have known it yet, between a long life and a short one. The boy, Chinedu, did not get his fake tablets from Ada's shop at all. His mother had bought them from a different chemist 3 streets over, a busy shop that took the cheap consignments and broke every seal the day it arrived, and kept no honest book at all. But that shop owner, a loud man named Sunday Ease, had a cousin in the local government and a quick tongue, and when the boy collapsed, and the word counterfeit began to move through the market. Like a grass fire, Sunday Ease did what frightened, guilty men do. He pointed away from himself. He stood in the middle of the market in the morning and swore on his mother's grave that he had never sold a fake drug in his life, that his stock was clean, that everybody knew where the bad medicine in this area really came from. And then he said her name, the quiet woman in the green shop, the one who thought she was better than everyone, who turned her nose up at honest cheap stock, who must be cutting her own drugs to make her fine margins. By noon, the rumor had a shape and a target, and the shape was Ada, and by 4 o'clock, the crowd was at her door with stones. Into this, on the afternoon of the broken glass, walked a man in a crisp khaki uniform shirt with a clipboard and an air of grave authority. His name was Pharmacist Coker, and he was a senior inspector with the National Drug Control Agency, the body whose job was to hunt counterfeit medicine across the country. To the crowd, he looked like justice arriving. To Ada, when she met his eyes across her ruined doorway, he looked like something colder, because a person who has kept honest books all her life learns to read a man who has already decided the verdict. Inspector Coker did not ask her a single real question. He did not ask to see her records. He stepped over the broken glass in his polished shoes, ran one finger along her shelf, lifted down a box of malaria tablets, and announced, loudly enough for the crowd at the door to hear, that the medicine was suspect, that the shop was sealed pending investigation, and that the owner would surrender her premises and her practicing license immediately. He produced a long yellow seal and pasted it across her door himself. What no one in that crowd knew, what Ada herself did not yet know, was that Pharmacist Coker had eaten dinner 4 nights earlier at the home of Chief Dr. Ikenamadu, and that an envelope thick with cash had changed hands across that table with one understanding, that when the counterfeit story broke, the inspector would make certain the file pointed at a small shop, and never, ever, at a warehouse on Victoria Island. The fix was already in before the first stone was thrown. Ada stood in the wreckage of the only thing her mother had left her, and watched a corrupt man paste a yellow lie across her door, and she did the one thing her mother had built into her bones. She did not beg. She reached under the counter, took out the worn blue ledger, held it against her chest with both arms, and walked out through her own broken doorway into a street full of people who wanted her destroyed. One person in that crowd was not shouting. An older woman named Mama Chidinma, who sold provisions and patent medicine from a stall at the mouth of the street, and who had known Ada's mother for 20 years, stood with her arms folded and watched the young pharmacist walk out clutching a book to her chest instead of money or jewelry, her chin level, her eyes dry. And something in the way she carried that book made the old woman push through the crowd and take her by the elbow and lead her away. Mama Chidinma did not believe the rumor for one moment. She had bought her own headache tablets and her own children's medicine from that green shop for years, precisely because the quiet girl refused the dirty stock everyone else sold. She took Ada to her stall, sat her on a low stool behind the sacks of rice, sent a boy running for water, and asked her one question, the only question that mattered. "Child," she said, "did you write it down?" And Ada, who had not let herself feel anything since the first stone, set the blue ledger on the upturned crate between them, opened it to the page from 9 days before, and pointed with a shaking finger at her own careful hand. The date, the Madhu Pharmaceutical's delivery note, the batch number, and the 3 words beside it: seal intact, unopened. Mama Chidinma put on her reading glasses, looked at the page for a long time, And then she said 3 words of her own that turned the whole story around. "Check the date," she said. "If you've made it this far into Ada's story, hit subscribe, because what happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you." Knowing the truth and proving it are 2 different cities, and the road between them in Lagos runs through a registry, a laboratory, and a man with more money than conscience. Mama Chidinma understood this in her bones. She had watched the powerful crush small traders before, not because the traders were wrong, but because they were poor and tired and could not afford the long, grinding fight, and the big men knew exactly how long a poor person could hold out. So she did not send Ada to weep at the agency office. She sent her to the one honest official she knew of in the whole rotten system. There was a junior enforcement officer at the drug control agency, a woman named Halima Bako, 29 years old, who had joined the service genuinely believing she could protect ordinary people from poison, and who had spent 2 frustrated years watching senior men kill her best cases for reasons she was not supposed to ask about. Mama Chidinma's youngest daughter had trained with Halima at Polytechnic, and through that thin thread, a meeting was arranged, quietly, away from the office, at a buka where no one was watching. Halima Bako came in plain clothes, suspicious and tired, expecting another sad story she would be powerless to fix. Then Ada opened the blue ledger on the plastic table between the plates of rice, and the young officer went very still, because Halima knew, better than anyone, what she was looking at. She turned the dated pages slowly, and she saw 3 years of a discipline she had almost stopped believing existed in a small shop. Every supplier, every batch, every seal, every date. In a hand that never skipped a day, she asked Ada one careful question. "When did you receive the Madhu carton?" she said. "And when did you break the seal?" And Ada told her. "It came on the Monday. The seal is still intact. I never opened it. The carton is still sealed on my back shelf behind the yellow tape, exactly where I left it." Halima Bako sat back, and for the first time in 2 years, something in her face that had gone to sleep woke up. Because the National Drug Agency, by its own law, kept an electronic record of the supply chain, and every legitimate sealed carton carried a batch and a tracking code that logged where it had been distributed. If Ada's sealed carton matched the very batch that was poisoning children across the city, and if the agency's own system showed that batch had been shipped out by Madhu Pharmaceuticals, then a sealed, unopened, dated carton sitting on a back shelf was not evidence against Ada at all. It was a loaded gun, pointed straight back at the man who had loaded it. But knowing this and proving it in Lagos are, again, 2 different cities. Halima told Ada the plain truth because she did not believe in feeding frightened people sweet lies. She told her the fight would be long and dangerous. She told her that Chief Madhu owned people inside the very agency she worked for, that files in this country vanished the way slippers vanish at a crowded mosque, that the inspector who had sealed her shop was almost certainly already paid, and that good cases died in that building every month. She told her it could take a year, maybe more, and that there were men who would not want Ada to live long enough to be believed. Then she asked her if she truly wanted to fight, and Ada, who had not cried when they threw stones at her, who had not cried when they pasted the yellow seal across her mother's shop, looked at the blue ledger on the table, the book her mother had filled, and then she had filled, and she said one word, yes. So they began. And here the story must do its accounting, because Chief Madhu and Inspector Coker and the loud man Sunday Ease had all told the same convenient tale, that Ada Nwosu was a greedy young woman who cut corners and sold poison to make a profit. That was the lie, and it was a tidy one. This is the ledger that answered it. In 3 years of business, Eddie's and Wosu had turned away 11 cheap consignments from unlicensed dealers, each one logged with the date and the words refused. No license in her own hand. She had bought every single drug she ever sold from registered wholesalers, and she had the dated invoices for all of them, banded in rubber that had gone brittle with age. 240 separate deliveries across 3 years without one gap. She had recorded the batch number of every carton, copied digit for digit, the way her mother taught her. 11,000 entries in a hand that never tired. She had logged the breaking of every seal on the day it was broken, so that for any box in her shop, she could name the hour it was opened. She had reported a suspected fake to the agency once before, 2 years earlier, in writing, and kept the copy. She had, in short, spent 3 years of her one life building the most boring and most unbreakable thing a person can build, which is an honest, dated record of exactly what she did and when. Chief Madhu had 1,000 lorries and a portrait in a lobby. Ada had a blue book that did not lie. The sealed carton on her back shelf was not a small detail. It was a witness that could not be frightened, bribed, or made to change its story, because the day she broke its seal was printed in 2 places at once, in her book and in the government's own system. For 3 weeks, Halima Bako worked the case in secret, in the cracks of her ordinary duties, while Mama Chidinma fed Ada and her shame both, never once asking to be repaid. The work was slow and real. Halima quietly pulled the distribution record for the poisoned batch and confirmed with her own eyes that it traced back to a Madhu Pharmaceuticals consignment. She matched the batch number on Ada's still sealed carton to that same poisoned lot. She took careful photographs of the sealed carton on the back shelf, the security seal hole, the yellow agency tape across the door, the date on the ledger page, building a chain a court could follow link by link. And slowly, entry by dated entry, the messy lived truth of one honest shop assembled itself into something every bit as neat as the lie that had been told about it, except that every single line of it had actually happened. Then the counterattack came, and for a stretch it looked as though the polished lie would win after all. Chief Madhu was not a man who lost quietly, because he had never lost at all. When word reached Victoria Island that a junior officer was pulling batch records and asking questions about a consignment that should have stayed buried, the machine he owned began to move. The electronic distribution record for the poisoned batch was abruptly marked corrupted and locked for maintenance, and a server that had held it for years conveniently failed. Inspector Coker filed a thick official report naming Ades Nwosu as the knowing distributor of counterfeit anti-malarials, complete with a tampered inventory that claimed her shop had received and opened far more of the bad batch than it ever had. And worst of all, on a Tuesday night, a small fire broke out in the back room of Ada's sealed shop. An electrical fault, the report said. And when the smoke cleared, the back shelf where the sealed carton had stood was a heap of ash. The one physical object that could destroy Chief Madhu, the sealed and dated carton, was gone. For 10 long days, it looked as though the big man would walk free because he had reached his hand directly into the system and pulled out the evidence and then set fire to what he could not reach. Halima Bako sat in her flat at night with her head in her hands, because a case is only ever as strong as what you can lay on a table in front of a judge, and the table had been swept clean and then burned. She came to Mama Chidinma's stall to tell Ada the worst, the lamp low, her voice flat with defeat. "The carton is gone," she said. "The server record is locked. It is now your handwritten book against his official report, and courts in this country, God forgive them, too often believe the cleaner paper. over the poorer person. Ada listened to all of it without moving. She did not weep. She did not wring her hands. She reached for the blue ledger and set it on the crate between them, plainly, squarely, the way Mama Chidinma had taught her to set down the truth, without begging and without apology. And then she reminded the exhausted young officer of something she had forgotten in her despair. The carton, Ada said quietly, was never the only place that batch number lived. Because she had copied that batch number, digit for digit, into the blue ledger on the day the sealed carton arrived, 9 days before any fire, beside the words, seal intact, unopened, and beside the Madhu Pharmaceutical's delivery note number. And the delivery note itself, the supplier's own paper, signed by the lorry driver, carried the same consignment code. The carton could burn. The server could be locked. But the batch number existed in her dated book, on the distributor's own signed delivery note. And, Halima realized slowly, sitting up straighter, in a third place that Chief Madhu, in all his cleverness, had never thought to reach. When the boy Chinedu had been admitted to the hospital, the doctors had kept the strip of fake tablets his mother surrendered, sealed it in an evidence bag as a matter of routine, and logged its batch number in the hospital's own pharmacovigilance record, a medical file entirely outside the drug agency, entirely outside Chief Madhu's web. 3 independent records, written by 3 different hands on 3 different days, all carrying the same batch number from the same poisoned Madhu consignment. He had burned 1 carton. He had never thought to burn a hospital. The turning of the tide did not come with shouting. It came with a tired young officer and a quiet pharmacist sitting across a desk from a hospital records clerk on a hot afternoon, asking for a certified copy of 1 pharmacovigilance entry and watching the clerk pull the boy's file and read out a batch number that matched the blue ledger exactly, digit for digit. It came with Halima Bako taking that certified hospital record and Ada's dated ledger and the distributor's own signed delivery note, and laying the 3 side by side until even a frightened system could not look away. And then the second proof arrived, because justice, when it finally turns, often arrives in twos. The warehouse manager at Madhu Pharmaceuticals, the frightened man who had been ordered to mix the bad cartons back into the good stock, had not slept properly in 3 months. Mama Chidinma's web of market traders, who hear everything in a city that imagines they hear nothing, had learned his name. And when he understood that a junior officer had somehow kept the thread alive, his conscience finished what his fear had started. He came forward of his own will and gave a written statement. He named the day Chief Madhu gave the order. He named the failed quality check and the 40 million naira the chief refused to lose. He described how the counterfeit cartons had been scattered thin across hundreds of small shops on purpose, so the blame would fall on the powerless and never on the warehouse. And he confirmed the consignment code that tied that poison to Ada's sealed and dated carton. The reckoning, when it finally came, was quiet, and it was total. The matter went before a judge, and Halima Bako, no longer a junior officer killing time in a corrupt office, but the lead witness in the case of her life, did not raise her voice once. She simply laid the records on the table, the way Ada had unknowingly taught everyone to lay down the truth. She laid down the blue ledger, open to the dated page, the batch number, in a careful hand beside the words, seal intact, unopened. Beside it, the distributor's own signed delivery note, bearing the same consignment code. Beside that, the certified hospital pharmacovigilance record, the same batch number logged by a doctor on the day a child nearly died. Beside that, the sworn statement of the warehouse manager. And last of all, she laid down Inspector Coker's official report, the neat, and polished lie, with its tampered inventory, claiming Ada had opened cartons her own dated book proved were never opened in her shop at all. The judge read the dates. The inspector's report swore that Ada's pharmacy had received and broken into the poisoned batch and sold it freely. Ada's dated ledger, the distributor's own delivery note, and the government's own original timestamp on a sealed carton all proved that the single carton of that batch ever to reach her shop had sat unopened behind a security seal until the day a corrupt agency taped her door, and that the poison that harmed the boy had been sold, days earlier, by a shop that kept no books at all, from stock that Madhu Pharmaceuticals had knowingly distributed. The forgery did not merely fail. It stood up in open court and accused itself, because a tampered inventory cannot survive a single honest date. The judge looked between the clean report and the dated book for a long, long time, and the courtroom went very quiet. And Chief Dr. Ikenemadu, sitting in his carved navy agbada with his expensive lawyers around him, understood before the judge ever opened his mouth that the careful, scattered, clever scheme he had built to bury the blame in 100 small shops was the very rope he had measured for his own neck. The court ruled, plainly and on the record, that Adizin Wosu had at no time distributed counterfeit medicine, that the report against her was false and tampered, and that her license and her shop were to be restored with her name cleared. But the judge did not stop at the question of one pharmacist. Knowingly distributing counterfeit drugs that harm a child is among the gravest crimes a person can commit in that country, and the burned carton and the locked server were now themselves evidence of a deeper rot. The judge referred the entire matter, Chief Madhu, Inspector Coker, the failed batch, the bribe, the fire, to the proper authorities for prosecution. Within the year, Chief Dr. Ikenemadu was charged. The case made the very same business pages that had once printed his smiling face above your health, our promise. And this time, the headline used a colder, shorter word. Inspector Folarin Coker was dismissed from the service and charged alongside him, and the loud chemist Sunday Ease, whose lie had aimed the mob, was charged for the counterfeit stock he had truly sold. Madhu Pharmaceuticals, a company built on the speed and reach of a man who believed that poison could be scattered faster than truth could be written down, lost its distribution license and its bank financing in the same month, and its great warehouse on the mainland fell silent, its 1,000 lorries going still and slowly orange, with rust under the bright Lagos sky. The man whose face had smiled out of 100 advertisements lost the company, the reputation, and the freedom he had traded his conscience to protect. He was undone, completely and in public, by a batch number he himself had printed on a carton and could not unprint. And Adizin Wosu did not gloat, not once. When a journalist found her outside the courthouse and asked how it felt to bring down a man like Chief Madhu, she said simply that she had not brought down anyone. She said her mother had taught her to write things down, and the writing had kept her alive. That was all. She said 5 words to the cameras, and then she went to see how the boy Chinedu was healing. The 5 words were these: "My mother taught me records. Now jump forward 4 years to a bright Saturday in the dry season, on the street in Mushin, where a mob once threw stones through a green door. The peeling paint is gone. The shop is still there, repainted a clean, deep blue, the color of a certain hardcover book, and above the door hangs a hand-painted sign. And the shop is busy from morning to night with mothers who trust the medicine inside it because they have learned, the hard way, what the quiet woman behind the counter refused to do for money. But the shop is no longer the whole of it. Beside it, in 2 rented rooms, Adizin Wosu runs something she calls the Kyoman Wosu Records Clinic, named for her mother, and it does one simple thing. It teaches small pharmacists and patent medicine sellers across Lagos, the poor, the overworked, the ones the big distributors expect to take the fall, how to keep an honest, dated record of every drug they receive, every seal they break, every batch they stock, so that no powerful man can ever again scatter his poison through their shelves and walk away clean. Halima Bako, who left the compromised agency and now heads the clinic's training with Ada, stands at a small whiteboard 2 mornings a week and tells frightened shop owners the same thing a market woman once told a stone-bruised girl. Check the date. Write it down. The paper is the only friend in the room that cannot be bribed. Mama Chidinma, older now and slower, sits in a cane chair by the clinic door in the cool of the evening and tells the new ones, the trembling young owners who think their carefulness is a weakness, that being slow and stubborn and honest is the strongest thing a small person can be in a city of big men. And a Daisy Nwosu, who was a respected pharmacist at sunrise, and a hunted woman by nightfall, and a vindicated one a long year later, stands behind her clean counter most mornings with a worn blue ledger open in front of her. A new one, the pages already filling in the same careful hand, because she still records every carton the day it arrives, still copies the batch number digit for digit, still writes seal intact, unopened beside the boxes. She will not break before their time, and she teaches every young pharmacist who passes through her clinic to do exactly the same, and to keep a second copy at home, the way her mother once told her, in a sentence the girl will carry now until she is old. Write it down. Paper does not lie, and paper does not forget. So here is what I want to leave you with tonight, here under the old Baobab, where we tell these tales by the fire. You can throw a stone through a window in a single afternoon. You can pay an inspector, scatter your poison thin, burn a carton, lock a server, and walk away in a crisp navy agbada, believing in your heart that money has finally bought you the truth. But you cannot reach back across the days and unwrite a single date that an honest hand set down before you ever decided to lie. A polished lie is fast. A kept record is patient. And patience, it turns out, has a memory longer than any powerful man's reach. A memory the color of a worn blue book, a sealed carton on a back shelf, a batch number copied by a daughter who loved her mother enough to keep her one stubborn habit alive. So let me ask you this, and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight. When the whole street wanted her destroyed, do you think Ada survived in the end because she was lucky? Or because a woman who loved her had taught her, years before, to write down the truth in a place no powerful man could ever reach? And if it had been your shop, your name, your face on the mob's lips that afternoon, would you have had the discipline, long before you ever needed it, to keep the kind of record that saves a life? Sit with that question a while. And so the fire burns low under the old Baobab tree. Stay a while and tell me where you watched from.